So Tom, you wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that was titled, ooh, it's loud, here we go, Save Capitalism by Paying People More. What about capitalism needs saving?
Well, it's not working for a lot of people. I think we're confused by looking at the unemployment rate at 3.6% or whatever it is and saying like everything's fine. And the points that you can notice where it needs saving, less than half of millennials really believe in capitalism. They're not really sure what socialism is. When you look at the research, they don't really understand that it's those of us who are older think of it as different. But they know it's not working for them. And one of the reasons it's not working is that 40% of Americans don't have $400 for an emergency. And so if you look at the financial health, and the one way you were to measure your temperature would be unemployment rate, you'd say, yeah, you're fine. But if you look and say 40% of the people don't have $400 for an emergency, you'd say that financially we're sick in America. And if the system doesn't work for people, people will change the system.
One of the things you did at Allstate is you raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour in 2016. What went into that decision? When did those conversations first start to happen?
Well, there weren't a lot of conversations. So I was down, we have a place in Dallas, and we had changed our medical benefits because people who have families get a lot more benefits than the people who are individuals. And we wanted to reduce that gap a little bit. So we had raised the price for families a fair amount. So I'm down in Dallas, and we got a couple thousand people down there, and like nobody's complaining. And I'm like, how come they're not mad? Like I would think they'd be yelling at me about the medical stuff. Like, oh, well, they're not on our plan. I said, what do you mean they're not on our plan? They said, well, they're on the state plan. I said, how can they be on the state plan? They said, well, they make like $12 an hour, and if you make $12 an hour, you can be in the state plan. I said, they make $12 an hour? That's ridiculous. Like we should pay more. So we decided to pay $15 an hour. It wasn't a long debate or discussion. We did it because we could. Now, not all jobs are worth that much money. I thought ours were. So part of the thing I've been saying is we need to figure out how to create more high-value jobs.
When you were going through this decision-making process, did anyone play devil's advocate? And when they did, what did they say to you? Like, Tom, we can't do this.
Well, they said, it was, I think it cost us $8 million a year down there. And they were like, we're trying to control our expenses, and we are trying to keep our prices low for our customers. The other side to that, though, is if you pay people more, they'll be more engaged. You'll have lower turnover. There's some stats that show that 20% of workers in America are actively disengaged on a daily basis. Actively disengaged, right? So you're like, okay, wow. If somehow I can have them feel more engaged, more empowered, then they'll be better workers, and it'll lower our costs in total.
Did you have to pass along the cost to customers in any way?
Yeah, but there's lots of things you pass. You hire consultants, you do advertising. I just decided it was the right thing to do. Like I didn't really get into that much math. There were a few people who didn't want to do it, but mostly it was just us saying, it's the right thing and move forward.
In your op-ed, you named that corporate leaders and boards need to put jobs on their agendas. So what does that look like?
Well, first, I want to go way up for a second, then come down. So I think the role of business is first serve our customers. We talked about that. We're supposed to make a profit. It's to create jobs, and it's to improve our community. So those are 4 things people expect of businesses. And the first one we talk about all the time. We do a pretty good job. Second one, some people think like profit's a bad idea. And I'm like, profit's just a measure of how much value you create. As a business, we take stuff from society. That's called cost. We give it back. It's called revenue. And if you give back more than you took, it's a profit. Now, there's a high art form on that, right? There's like a couple million accountants and public accountants and all kinds of rules in the SEC. When you go to the third part, creating jobs, there's no math. And it's every bit as important. If you ask Americans, you think businesses should make money, about 35-40% say, yeah, they should make money. If you ask them, should they create jobs, like over 50%, it's almost 60%. And so if it's that important to society, if that's why we exist, then we have to do that. And most businesses don't talk that much about it.
How did they start? How does a business start? Someone says, Tom,
Well, I think
help me out. Give me a plan.
Well, I think it has to start with investors, and it has to start with boards. And so, in this op-ed I wrote, like, I've been hanging around corporate boards for my whole career, and we talk about profit in every board meeting, like every committee meeting, like it's everywhere, right? If you said, how many times do they talk about just creating jobs? Not how many jobs did you create because you were winning or something like that, but just your objective is to create jobs. It's a fraction, and I've talked to friends and other people I know, and it's the same everywhere. So first thing is we need to start talking about it. Second is we need to figure out how to measure it, and I think part of it is also we need to get investors to start asking people like me, like, what are you doing on creating jobs? Because, you know, it's easy for me to say, but if every time I go to a meeting, you know, we all got bosses, so mine are, I got a board and I got shareholders, and so when they go in, and if every time they ask you how much money we make, you tell them. If you said how many jobs you create, I would tell them. They never ask. So we need to get investors to start saying, look, going to the companies they invested in, say, yeah, we want to know about how much money you're making, how you're serving your customers. We're interested in ESG, which is another hot button these days, or environmental social governance. But also, are you creating any jobs? Because creating jobs is what society expects of us.
Let's talk about your workforce. You mentioned that statistic that 20% are actively disengaged.
Yeah.
You have a program where you really want to get to people, quite literally, and help them figure out their power of purpose. What is this program?
So we're big believers in purpose. We're on the path to becoming a purpose-driven company. We're not yet totally filled up with purpose-driven people, but we're headed there. The concept is, if people are your key asset, that's because we don't really make anything. You know, we just got a bunch of people come in every day and go to work, get on their computers, and you want them to be motivated. So we decided to do this program we viewed it as give to get. If we give to the employees their ability to think of what their own purpose is, then they would give back to us with commitment to us. And that's turned out to be true. So we have a program where we help you figure out your own individual purpose. It's not linked to Allstate. It's not linked to what we do. It's just like, why do you do what you do? When you get up in the morning, you got up to come here today, you came here for some reason, and it's about giving people the opportunity to figure out what their purpose is and then build their life around it. And so we've helped 34,000 people through that, and we're always in the top decile of companies in terms of engaged employees, which I think works for us.
Is it a mandatory program?
No, although it's becoming a little cultural, you know, it's like if you don't go. It's mandatory for our leaders. So if you're one of the top 200 leaders in a company, you have to go. Everybody else, you can just self-select it. So the numbers on it are off the charts in terms of how much people like it, but it's a little biased because it's self-selection. You know, if you really don't want to do it, you just don't go.
So what happens? What kind of questions are you asking people to ask of themselves? What kind of considerations?
Well, it has two parts to it. And I would recommend this for everybody. Really thinking about what your purpose is will make your life better. So it has two parts to it. It has a physical part and a purpose part. And you collect all this information. You know, you collect what you eat, how much you sleep, so you don't write down that you ate the brownie, or you don't eat the brownie because you got to write it down. You know, so you kind of cheat on some of this stuff. But then you do 360s with your friends, your families, and you get all this information. And we teach you about exercise, nutrition, and movement. We also help you, and that's to give you the energy to figure out how to live into your purpose. In your purpose, you do three things. You write down what's your current story. And it's in a positive way. So like mine was, the truth is I have a good relationship with my kids, but I run the risk of them making my story their story. Truth is I can be a good CEO doing who I am, but I run the risk of not leaving behind enough good leaders and burning out. So it's positive, right? But it recognizes, like all of us, we make trade-offs every day. Then you write down your purpose, and you write your purpose down on paper, because if you write it down, you won't lie to yourself. You won't tell yourself little stories. And then you share that purpose with other people, very important, because if you share it, you change the system that you operate in, because people want to help you. And then you write your new story cleverly called New Story, because you're going to do something different. But then, importantly, you build a 90-day training program
90 day?
around it. 90, yeah. It's by week, but you spread it out, and it's like every day. And so, like I had really no upper body strength because I was always a runner. So I started doing that. I call my mother, at least every other day, usually every day, because it got into my training program. You put it in a training program, you do it for 90 days, kind of sticks with you. If you don't, the concept is forget it, don't worry about it. And so it's Energy for Life. It's created by a company called the Human Performance Institute down in Florida. And I would highly recommend, think about it. Invest in yourself. Give yourself a few minutes to step back and think about your purpose. We did that, and it ties together neatly with our purpose at Allstate. We don't ask people to link your purpose to ours or something like that. We want them to have theirs, and we think if they believe in theirs, they'll help us get ours.
What's been the impact on the workforce of this program? Anecdotally or?
Anecdotally, if you take the program, you really like it. People send me photos of themselves, how they're different now than they were before. Some of that's the physical stuff. But some people have left us. And I'm okay with that. We had one of the best reinsurance guys in the world left us. He wanted to go be a math teacher. And I was like, okay, better you do that than be a 55-year-old crabby person who thinks we convinced you to stay here your whole life. It's freeing for people, and it's freeing to know what your purpose is, to write it down, and to share it with other people. Somehow eliminates that burden of people not helping you, and it also helps you define yourself the way you want to define yourself.
What do you think is the obstacle for people to figuring out their purpose? As someone who's seen a lot of these reports and seen the impact of it, what stops people from finding their purpose?
One is just having a structure around it and take some time. Because, the day-to-day, my grandmother once said to me, they put a man on the moon, and I was out at her house looking up at the moon. And I'm like, isn't it amazing? There's a guy on the moon, and you grew up in the horse and buggy days. And she said, not really. She said, it just happens a day at a time. Your life happens a day at a time. Unless you step out of that day and step back and say, why am I doing this? Why am I, and give yourself that. So you need, some of it's just making the time. I think there's, I know I felt nervous, maybe self-aware, self-centered, sharing your purpose with other people. Do they really want to know? And am I making it all about me? I have found when you share your purpose with other people, they embrace it. They're thankful that you shared it with them, and they will help you do it. It's because they want you to succeed, and so I think some of it's just in our own heads of not wanting to be vulnerable.
How has it changed your career trajectory, finding your purpose? Some choice you made?
That's interesting because. One of the ways, so here's in a very tactical way. So my purpose is to help other people achieve more meaning and success in their lives. That's what I do. That's part of the reason I'm here. And it wasn't always the case. My purpose at one time was I had a dial phone and I wanted a push button phone to get promoted, But so you have different purposes over time. Now I'm kind of in this other realm. So now I do performance reviews differently. When I do a performance review, I say to somebody, look, my job is to make you more successful. So I'm going to give you this feedback to try to make you more successful. I might be wrong, but I'm really trying. I get paid to evaluate you. I got to do that. But it's also helped me in things like the op-ed. If my purpose is to try to help people have more success, when I wrote the op-ed, I shared it with my board. Not because I said, look, I'm not sharing it with you because you get to approve what I do. But I'm talking about boards, and we don't talk much about jobs. If you're going to be offended, let me know so you at least know in advance. And one of them said, well, what happens if you don't create enough high-paying jobs? You're putting yourself out there. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. So if somebody else does, then it's further along in my purpose that someone else did it. So I think it frees you up to take risks. It gives you the intestinal fortitude when you get that emotional pushback during a day. We all have them, where like someone pushes on you and like, "Get this, drive me crazy," and you go back and say, "Okay, why am I here? I'm here because I'm doing this," and it helps you get past it.
I'm going to take some questions in just a few minutes, so go to Slido and do your thing. Your op-ed came out after something called the Business Roundtable, which was a group that represented large corporations, right? Allstate's not part of this, was not part of this roundtable. And it was this statement about how corporate boards are going to, and corporate companies were going to do better, and they were going to be better stewards, and they were going to be more invested. But one of the things about this report, if you dug into it, is there were 3 banks that made a lot of money off the housing crisis. There was Amazon, fill in your complaint there. There was FedEx, which I don't know if anybody listened to the Daily this morning or read the New York Times about them paying 0 taxes. Going on and on. Boeing is on that list. The CEO signed it. These are all these CEOs who signed it. What is the use of those kind of statements in terms of if you're going to have companies that maybe they're telling, but they're not showing? They're saying, yes, we're going to do this, but their corporate behavior is otherwise.
I mean,
what is the use of something like that?
It's a really good question. First, I think the BRT thing was well said. It wasn't that specific, so I think the next step is let's be more specific. That's why I wrote the op-ed about creating jobs. I'm like, yeah, it's great, but it's kind of general. But you have to change the environment in which we have the dialogue. And so I thought they were starting to change that dialogue. They didn't have prescription on it. And I would say, we're all in this together, and none of us are perfect. Like I have 3 kids. Like some things like I tell them to do that I don't do, and vice versa. I think if we change the context, people will think differently about that which they did. And just because they didn't do it before doesn't mean they won't do it in the future. Right? Like, so maybe people will think differently about the housing crisis. Maybe, FedEx is being criticized for, not paying taxes. Maybe they'll think differently about it. I don't know. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. I'm not judging, but I think if we don't have the dialogue and we sort of say everybody gets to do it their own way and none of us have social responsibility, then I think capitalism will continue to be attacked.
Let's take a question. This is from Julie, who is a climate scientist. How do you think about the opportunities and challenges of climate change and the energy transition for business?
So, I think climate change is real. I think it's man-made, and by just the change of the world, it's hard for me to attribute how much is which, but certainly as human beings, we can do a better job of not ruining our planet. So, and I'd say climate change is real. We have this ad with Dennis Haysbert's in the middle of this storm. He says, this is a 1 in a 500-year storm. He says the only difference has been 26 in the last 10 years. And so, the weather's a lot more severe. I can tell you about it. I think we need to go after climate change. I think we need to figure out how to, quit spewing carbon into the air, and we should tax carbon. Anytime there's a free good for society, people overuse it. So that would be my answer. The other part, though, that I'm sad we're not after is remediation. And of course, I see this. We all see this from our own chair. But in the insurance business, you see all these people losing all their possessions, all their stuff, because we don't have enough support if a hurricane comes or stuff floods or we don't protect them, the levees aren't good. So while we need to make sure we fix it over a 50-year period of time, we also should do more with just the fact that it's more severe today. And I feel like everybody keeps arguing about, how did it get created? I'm like, does it really matter? What we do know is it's here, so we should fix that, help people have enough protection when stuff happens. And then let's quit doing stuff we know is bad. Even if it doesn't, you wouldn't wreck something that you have yourself, even if you weren't going to use it. Why would you wreck it?
How do you think about the connection between someone's personal purpose and the company's purpose?
Well, Allstate's purpose, we're very clear about it. We have a one-page deal. It's our shared purpose. Lots of companies have it. And so we put that out there for everybody. We ask them to, and that includes their leadership behaviors and how they should act inside a company, because a company has a culture. It's a self-reinforcing system. And so we want them to have if they bring their personal purpose, we believe that they'll embrace our purpose. So that's the give to get. We don't ask them to make sure that their personal purpose lines up with ours. Like, you just have what you want to do and go make a difference.
This is from Kate. How does AI factor into purpose and profit? How do you reconcile the need for AI as it helps your bottom line and the need to create jobs and raise wages?
That's a really interesting question, because I'm right in the middle of it. So I think AI is like a tsunami going to rip through the service industry. And let me give you an example. If your car used to get wrecked, you would drive to one of our 937 drive-thrus, or you would go to a body shop and we would send an adjuster there to look at your car and figure out how much it costs to fix it. Today, you send us 6 pictures, no more drive-thrus. We have fewer adjusters because they're not driving around. We're paying them to sit in front of a computer, and eventually the computer's going to do a lot of that work too. And so as a result of that, that's changed our employment with people. So one of the things I'm thinking about in jobs is I said to our team, how much do we pay those people? People who used to drive around and be and how much do we pay them now? And they're much more productive now. And so we're looking at, we think we have to pay them more. Even though think in their minds they're doing the same job, they're just making more money for us. So thinking about how you pay relative to how much value somebody creates, rather than what you can get away with and what's the lowest price in the marketplace. So that's part of it. The other part is back to the employee proposition. I think it's about employability, and we're behind in this. I've been complaining about it for a couple of years, and I've not been successful, which is, if I can't guarantee you a job, because AI is going to rip through Allstate, what I can do is ensure you're employable. And employable, we have a really simple question. It's you can get another job at the same or more money. Like, not really complicated and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to make that part of our employee value proposition, which means I got to spend money training people to do stuff that's maybe not for us.
Some people think CSR is just marketing to distract from bad business practices. Does this criticism have any merit? How do you respond to it?
Does it have any merit? Yeah, I guess it has merit. I mean, maybe some people do it, but I'm like, okay, well, like, first I would focus on, is the CSR stuff doing good work? Does it intent really matter? If you're helping people who are underprivileged or need additional help, like, that should be a good thing. And I don't. Sometimes I feel like we get all caught up in, like, what's the intent? I don't know. Like, I'm happy they're helping people.
You sound like you have a really interesting mix of the practical and sort of the spiritual about all of this. You're sort of like, got to get it done, but we have to think about it on a higher plane too. How does that work? How do you combine those two?
Well, you have to build strategic, we call it middleware. So, in your computer, you got a keyboard, and then you have the processor in there, that's zeros and ones. And that keyboard, there's a bunch of middleware. It's not really a good technical description. A bunch of middleware between the keyboard and the processor. And so if you think of the keyboard as your vision statement or your own purpose, and you think about the processor, the zeros and ones, as your day-to-day activity, what we try to do is build out a series of middleware that helps us figure out how to do it. So what's my purpose? I write it down. What does that translate into how often I call my mother? What does that translate into how I treat my kids? What is it? And you keep breaking it down, so then when you get to that day-to-day activity and I'm tired and I don't want to go do upper body strength stuff, but I'm like, nope, part of my purpose was I need to be strong and have decent posture. Because if I'm not strong, don't have decent posture, I'm not going to be able to help other people. So you build out this middleware. I wish I had thought about this earlier. I've been on this purpose journey for about 15 years, and I sort of feel like the middleware stuff, If I had spent more time on it 15 years ago, I'd be farther along. I feel like I was just in this dark room and I kept bumping into the wall, and I'm looking for the door, and the door was, oh, you better define it. So what I've found is if I define it and I write it down, I'm likely to do it, and that helps me get my purpose.
Tom Wilson, Chair and President and CEO of Allstate. Thanks so much.
Thank you.